In a lifeguard movie called The Guardian, I saw a scene that forever changed how I thought about helping people. The scene occurs during a lifeguard training session, and one lifeguard was playing the role of the person being saved. And during the attempt to save someone, another person popped up behind that lifeguard and grabbed him from behind. And in a fearfully violent attempt to save himself, he tried to gain leverage over the lifeguard, which was causing both of them to sink underwater and possibly drown. After about 20 to 30 seconds of being underwater struggling, the lifeguard was able to briefly free himself and both of them surfaced. Then again, the person being rescued began grabbing the lifeguard from behind out of fear and the desire to stay above water. But this time the lifeguard gave him a hard elbow to the face and just about knocked him out. The person was relaxing in the water, or, almost unconscious, and the lifeguard was able to bring him to the shore and explain, and while he was explaining to him that he was there to help. Yes, as humans, we can hurt, be distressed, and a bunch of other things. But this is not the end. After going through some things in life, I found myself in a role of a person being rescued, which in itself is a hard pill to swallow if you're normally the person being asked to help. First, I'm not a doctor, psychiatrist, licensed therapist, anything, any remotely related, except a human, and of course I mentor people and help other people through situations. However, I've been through hard things myself. And if you're looking at this video, you've probably gone through some hard situations as well. If anything, this is just an idea of how some people may be able to deal with PTSD or grief based on my experience and things that I've learned and experienced. Not sure how successful doctors are with these types of events in life, but feel free to get their approval before trying this. At the very least, if we can get someone to the point of being able to talk about their experiences or seek healing or find more of a place more of a peace at a certain level, I would consider this successful. Otherwise, just know that you are not alone. That said, we should also appreciate your respectful comments because how you were able to get through some hard times, or even your encouragement to other people who are going through hard times, might be able to help somebody else. However, this is in no way required, so you don't feel obligated, especially if you don't feel comfortable. But sometimes it may actually help you by trying to help somebody else. Let's start with my theory. I believe the main issue with grief and PTSD is that each issue consists of a lot of mixed emotions and dilemmas combined into one giant issue or an event. And it's not that we can't deal with grief or PTSD, but it is so big and massive that we really need to break it down into more manageable portions. And as we go through this season in life, I would like to pose the question, how do you eat an elephant? As a frame of reference. And if you're familiar with this question, you already know what the answer is. And that's one bite at a time. The main elements of PTSD or grief, based on my opinion, can be composed of a few different components that I'll be listing in a little bit. Not necessarily everything that could be listed, and not necessarily everything is listed in the same capacity. As everyone is different and the issues and situations we deal with are different as well. The main key is making the decision to find out what your PTSD or grief is made of, and the idea of dealing with it in smaller portions. That said, I feel like the need to express another issue that can be a consequence of PTSD and or grief, and that is the loss of time. I personally have lost a great deal of time as a result of grief, and ironically, time appeared to have stopped for me internally in a lot of areas, even though I was still progressing, but passed in a greater pace in reality. So I felt like time really had stopped, but everything else just kept going while I was dealing with this, which is kind of messed up. So 10 to 20 years can pass by if you're not careful. And subsequently, this can also lead to destruction of relationships. But there's no time limit for recovery, and I believe some breakthroughs can be relatively quick. So thanks for being here and for taking your first steps toward a better day. As stated, the primary concept of this plan is to dissect difficult life issues or situations or occurrences, such as PTSD and grief, in a way that's more manageable. Considering this, let's look at PTSD as being composed of multiple slices of a pie, of the worst piece and top pie that you could possibly think. And it just depends. The pie slices can be large, they can be medium, they can be small. And it depends on the desire for that day or that time, how you want to deal with it. And in the same token, the slices of pie can be further divided into smaller aspects of PTSD or other challenging situations. Some complex obstacles can include grief, hopelessness, despair, fear, failure, anxiety, regret, broken promises, not being able to save someone, loss, an unfulfilled desire of revenge, and even unanswered prayers. And considering that all of these obstacles are just pieces of one large pie, I'm just suggesting to eat this pie one slice or one bite at a time, because it's easier than trying to eat the whole pie in one setting, like you're in a pie eating contest or something like that. And especially if it's a pie that doesn't taste good. At this point, we're going to name our pie. And it could be any type of pie. And this is not something you really have to do. You could call it a cherry pie, you can call it a blueberry pie, and just add what you're dealing with. So cherry PTSD pie would be an example, or a blueberry grief pie would be the name of the pie. However, you can be more specific by saying cherry, I lost my mom last year pie, or blueberry, I lost my ability to stand pie. And the more honest and specific you are, which I would encourage you to do, the faster I believe your relief may come. But don't be discouraged and don't be your own enemy. Just go through the process. First, let's start naming your pie. Feel free to pause the video or listen to it as many times as needed at this point. For me, I was thinking coconut cream pie. Not sure if I've ever tasted it before, but it don't sound good. So I definitely don't like blueberries in a lot of ways. So I'm gonna go with blueberry for mine. And I should say that you'll need a laptop or a computer to learn to journal, but having a notebook will work just as well. And of course, it's more easily accessible And you can actually carry it around with you. And if you ever have a situation where you feel some type of, I will say like an anxiety attack, or you have a situation that just makes you go back into that, remember that PTSD, the issue or whatever, you can just stop on the side of the road if you're driving, pick up your notebook, and just start journaling, however you feel at that particular time. And then just make sure you get as much of it out of you as possible. Because that's the key to actually, it's part of the key to actually helping to release yourself from this particular thing. Getting back on track. Name your experience, such as a divorce from a husband, loss of a friend in combat, loss of a child, etc. Next, draw a circle and create a graph on a computer if you want to do that. If you're really, really savvy with Excel, you can also just draw your own little circle and make it into a pie chart. And then it's probably better just to list all the things or the feelings that you have that you know of at that particular moment. And it's really a living list. And as you learn more about yourself and the situation, how you feel with it, just add to that list and you can adjust your pie as you want to. But you want that pie to be a physical representation of the situation you're going through. And then as we just deal with issues, we're going to start marking out pieces of that pie as they're taken care of, or we have peace in that particular area. So you can list your aspects, and like we had previously stated, such as grief, hopelessness, despair, fear, failure, anxiety, regret, broken promises, not being able to save someone, loss, desire for revenge, and even pride. That said, let's quantify each issue, which should all add up to 100% as the total. And so you can have 50% grief, you can have 5%, 10% hopelessness, 5% anxiety, and 35% regret in your particular pie chart. But it must add up to 100% because we don't want to miss anything. And by the time we get you back, once you finish the pie, you should be 100% better than you are. Not saying that you're going to be the same person necessarily, but you'll have at least addressed 100% of the issues and hopefully gain a lot more peace in that particular situation. There may be a situation where you know of something, but you just don't know how to describe it. For this situation, you still must be able to quantify it, and then later on you can actually name it once you have a better idea of what it actually is. Sometimes you might have a situation where you feel the pain of a particular issue, but you don't really know what it is. You don't know what it is. You don't know how to describe it. You don't know how to quantify it, but you just know it's there. And it's something that's just kind of digging at you and stabbing you, but you just don't know how to do it. So that's okay, and you can feel free to make room for things like that. And actually, you should make room for things like that. And that way, as you move all the other issues, or start dealing with them, it may actually bring you more clarity to further define that particular issue. Also, feel free to update the quantities as well. I mean, as you go through this situation, you may need to make another pie chart. Make another one, re-quantify it, relist it, and just do it. The point is to do anything you need to do to help you gain some type of peace resolution to this situation, and so you can live better, You can love better. You can do the things that you need to do, and even whether, because sometimes life can stop you as far as business and dreams that you had, relationships, whatever. So, point is to move forward. The next step is to define the aspects of each slice of that particular pie chart as it relates to your own personal situation. Be in depth and honest about how you feel, how it affected you, why it made you mad, why it made you feel worthless, and any other thing that you can write down to describe that particular situation, whether it be, let's just say, grief. What is everything in grief that made it grief? And feel free. You can have PTSD and you can have grief, and so you might have to create a pie chart for PTSD, which includes grief, and then create another pie chart for grief, and then break it down in the same manner you do everything else. And for anything else you do, because grief in itself, I think, has its own challenges that a lot of times we don't really know how to deal with. It's kind of like being somebody throwing a pail of water in your face consistently, and you just trying to breathe and survive that pail of water, but you don't really know you don't know where to go and how to get out of it. And so we're just trying to make it more manageable. Also, I would say keep this private. Keep it honest. Keep it private, because you want to be as honest with yourself, as dirty with yourself, as violent as you can be in writing only. And so you're just writing how you feel. And how you feel can be a whole lot more worse than actually what you would actually do. But if you can write it down on paper, it'll keep you from going into places where you don't really want to go or need to go. Excuse me. Now we'll name some potential slices as they may result to your pie. And this is just based on my thoughts process, for these particular items. Pride, I didn't really think of pride initially, but when dealing with issues, it really kind of makes sense. It is also an important gateway to dealing with grief as well as PTSD. We can have self-pride or pride in how people see us. But for this to work, we must be completely honest with ourselves when we are alone with our thoughts. So you can pick a time when nobody's around, look in the mirror and admit your failures or perceived failures or something you could have done better. But after that, we need to admit our victories as well. Because a lot of times we, in society, we'll just say, we'll take Will Smith, for example, and I apologize if he gets offended at me using his name in this. But I heard a statement that he's been squeaky clean, always done good things for 30 years. But at that award ceremony, when he had the altercation with Chris Rock, I believe, everybody forgot about everything else he did. Everything else. And I think a lot of times we do that to ourselves. We forget about all the good things we've done, the good impacts we had on people, and we don't and we don't necessarily use that as fuel to help us get past bad situations. Now, this being talking about pride, it's not that it makes us, it's to reinforce our pride and who we are, but really it's to reinforce our confidence, because anybody can make a bad choice, have a bad response, do something bad or out of character. But we still got to be able to recover from that. And then the things that you've done in the past may be a stepping stone to remind you of who you actually are, what you've done, so that you can help get past this particular situation of PTSD or grief. Let's just say you can do 2 of each. Write them down in a place or on a computer where nobody else has access to. And if you have a better day, write more of the more positive things than you do of the negative things. But you really want to kind of balance. I would say just balance it out if you possibly can. If you got 2 bad things you find out about yourself, you got to write 2 good things, okay? If you have one day, feel really good, you got 2 bad things, write 5 good things, But the point is to kind of build yourself back up, because you're not as bad as you think you are, Of course, a lot of times we're not as good as we think we are either. But in this situation, we're really just kind of beating ourselves up, and it may not be justified. And if it is justified, we still got to get past it so we can actually progress and do better things. The next one we'll talk about is grief. Grief, to me, is like a boat with no oars in the middle of the ocean during the worst part of the storm. The ocean produces waves, and the wind, the wind produces waves to take you up and down at random times. It could take you left, it could take you right as well. And in some instances, you might go into multiple directions at once. You could be thrown up in the air and just fall down. And it's one of the most unstable places, I guess, you can really be in. Now, if you can imagine being in a bad storm where it's really raining hard, a lot of humidity in the air, you got the wind blowing in your face, it's almost to the point of taking your breath away. I guess it kind of reminds me when Jesus was boating the disciples. I guess that was kind of that feeling of hopelessness, because they were like freaked out. Like, why you sleep, But storms are, especially a storm on the ocean. I've never really been in one on the ocean. Well, small one, and waves can get, pretty high. You can get pretty wet, and I wasn't even in a bad storm. I think it was just a slight storm, and it was raining. So being in a straight up hurricane storm in the middle of the ocean has got to be ridiculous. But I would imagine that's kind of like PTSD and grief, because you can't really tell what's coming. And that's from the inside, that's also from the outside, because you're still dealing with your other things in life. You still got to deal with your bills, you still got to deal with your family, you still got to deal with work, all this stuff, while you're actually going through grief and PTSD. So for a person that's used to being in control and managing issues, frustrations in life, grief is a mountain without a peak and zero visibility. You know where you need to go, but your feet just don't want to move. But if you fall forward, just know that you're still making progress in that particular situation. So always fall forward if you're going to fall. If you got to crawl, crawl. Because crawling is still progress. If you got to get on your hands and knees, get on your hands and knees. As long as you're moving, it's still progress. Keep moving. The idea is to realize the progress and thank God for it. If you believe in God, of course. Accept that you did it. Hey, I actually fixed something today. Woo! Hey, it was, I erased a period at the end of a sentence that didn't need to be there, but hey, you did something, And those small victories are things that you need to help move you forward. You can also have a thing I would call self-grief. And self-grief is really disappointing yourself with bad decisions. It could be bad situations that you put yourself in or circumstances. Constantly beating yourself up, shaming yourself, not believing that you have any additional value in yourself due to making a bad choice in a relationship or other things, or examples of, I think, reasons that people have grief within their self. This can also be a result of people that have hurt you in the past with no reason at all. And the way people treat you sometimes can we can define ourselves by the way people treat us, and we shouldn't do that, because there are certain people who just don't do things right. Excuse me. They don't do things right, they don't treat people right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person or you've done anything wrong. It could be something that's wrong with them. The next one I'll bring up is hopelessness. Hopelessness is not being able to see the future. Have you ever had an idea fail, but were able to adjust and move on? Hopelessness is the inability to adjust and move on, like losing sight of a goal due to the fog of life. For this situation, let's just shorten the steps and create smaller goals. Like I was saying previously, you want to move forward, and if you can move forward, you can get yourself into that mode of actually doing better, little by little, small victories, progress. The next one is helplessness. We talked about hopelessness, and now we're going to talk about helplessness. And these are things that you want to write down, and you want to further define what made you feel hopeless in the situation. Write down everything. Okay? Anything, any feeling, any anger, whatever it is. The next one, I'm going to do the same thing. This is helplessness. So if you felt helplessness in your PTSD, grief, whatever it is. One of the worst feelings in the world, especially as a man, which is the sense of not having any type of control or influence over a particular situation. It's kind of like seeing somebody in the hospital, knowing they're in pain, especially if they're a kid, knowing they're sick, seeing them and not being able to do anything about it. That is a rough situation to be in, especially if it's your kid. But again, write it down. Write how you felt in a way that completely explains how you felt. Whether it be anger, it could be anger, it could be helplessness, it could be like worthlessness, whatever. You want to write all that stuff down. You didn't like the way the hospital nurse looked at you, whatever. Okay? Write down a situation that made you feel helpless, or the circumstances of the situation. The idea is to exhaust all the feelings that you had for that particular situation and write it down. So if you remember anything later, write it down. Again, as it is the way to provide a different perspective that you had for a particular situation. And then you can go back and look at it later, and then once you have it down, sometimes writing it down once can help you write it down in a way that you understand it better. So you could write down the same situation 50 times and explain 50 times how you felt depending on how you feel now, so that it will help you. The next is despair. Despair is the complete loss of hope. It's the concept of grabbing water and realizing that you can never hold on to it. The fix for this issue really is just to freeze the water. Turn that situation into something tangible that you can actually hold on to. For instance, if you lost a high-paying job that was a unique opportunity and no other positions are available, the goal would be to seek a lower-paying job where you can use the same skills and possibly learn some new ones. So you're going to still be in the situation you're in, still be working toward the goal. You just got to accept the fact that you got to start lower. You got to start over again. Not over necessarily, but you just got to start at a different position. But the goal is to get back where you were and possibly more, and then be better at it. It may be a setback financially, but spiritually it would be a step forward. But then again, that's the point, which is to move forward. Don't let your setbacks really just set you back. We just can't let things like that just stop us from living our life. Fear is the next one. Fear is the great stress. The fear of great stress or a situation occurring again. The fear of failure. The fear of success. The fear of liking something that you shouldn't. The fear of becoming or being someone you never thought you would become. And any fear that you could possibly think of in that particular situation. That's a rough one. Because depending on what the situation is, you can have fear of being fired, you can have fear of being sick, you can have fear of losing legs, you can have fear of losing friends. And fear is never good. But the reality of life is anything can happen to us at any day, at any time. And we want to be able to know that things are out there, guard against them as much as we can. And then, if we do get into a situation, just know that we've done everything we possibly can to avoid particular situations. And we can take comfort in that, because believe it or not, you can't avoid everything. But you can do your best to actually live as good and as positive and as successful as you can. The next is failure to achieve an attainable goal. What was the goal? Why do you believe you failed? Why did you fail? Who did you fail against? And why were you mad at it? These are things you want to consider to write down for this particular slice. The next slice would be anxiety. This could be nervousness, could be fear of failure, could be cold feet, could be a relationship you didn't go into that you thought you should have. Describe how you felt, what you did right, and what you did wrong. Write that thing down. And then write how you could actually have did it better the next time, Write down your fears. The next slice would be regret. Making a wrong decision under pressure or when you initially thought you were making the right choice. Oh my goodness. Regret is a fun one. Like, I'll just say I regretted buying a timeshare. I knew it was bad at the time, but I had some, let's just say, motivation to do something I really didn't want to do in order to keep a situation from being negative. But it ended up being a bad decision altogether. Should have went with my first choice, but yeah, not very cool. Took a long time to pay it off. Hate it. Still hate it. But sometimes you have things you do, but you can't change it. You know what I'm saying? Once you make a decision, the decision's made, and you just kind of ride that thing out. And the best thing you can do is just to ride it out as best you can. See if you can find a way out legally, of course, and just keep pressing. Take it as a learning situation, and tell other people when you can, and make better decisions later. But you want to write down what all the what ifs are, and hey, what if I did this? What if I did that? If you're a perfectionist, that's even worse. Don't be a perfectionist. I would say operate in excellence. Doing the best you can, making the best decisions you can, is better than trying to be a perfectionist, because there's nobody that's just perfect. It's hard to be. Now, you can make a perfect decision in certain situations, but that's not always. But if you give yourself a little bit of grace, and you can still have regret, but you use regret as a means of helping you make better decisions the next time. You can regret taking revenge for a certain action against you that wasn't serious enough, to be even acknowledged. And sometimes you can do things or say things to certain people, and you can't take it back. You can't apologize. They won't let you apologize. And so you can have regret in that. So that will be another thing that you can write down. But yeah. The next one slice would be not being able to keep impossible promises. An impossible promise would be like, you can't always be there. I can't always be there for your kids. Can't always be there for your spouse. You can't always be there for your family. And like I said, anything can happen at any time. And so you got to be able to forgive yourself for that, or give yourself grace for that. Prepare as best as you can. And if something happens, God forbid, just know that you already try to do as much as you can. And I would say we can actually be in a situation where we can be angry about something, and we can react in a way that we normally wouldn't have. And because of that, a situation can happen because we weren't as attentive as we could have been. Write it down. Write it down. You can't always hug the person. You can't always comfort a person in the right way. Can't always say the right thing. Me Too is a big thing, you know what I'm saying? And some people are just not good people. Some people don't want to be, they don't want to be helped. They don't want to be comforted. They don't want you to comfort them. And sometimes they're just situations, just more trouble than it's worth. Oh boy. Whew. All right, so the next one is not being able to save people that you couldn't save. Write down people you couldn't save. And sometimes you have people that don't want to be saved. You have people that shouldn't be saved by you. Not saying they don't have to be saved or need to be saved, but sometimes you're just not the person to do that particular action. So you got to know, if that person does not want you to save them for whatever reason, let's just say they have unforgiveness or some other issue with you, or they have something they're holding against you, I can't really tell you how to get around that thing. But sometimes you just really got to wait on that person to reach out to you, and then just try to be there as best you can. But at the same time, realize that hurting people hurt people, and it doesn't really make sense to put yourself in harm's way. And there's really no guarantee that things will be resolved. So it's better for you just to pray for them and give it to God, or leave it up to that particular person. Honestly, I can't tell you a real good response for that. Because sometimes the best part of you, the best thing you could possibly do for a certain person, still will be taken negatively. Like you had a person, and let's just say you had some type of issue in the past, and now because you feel guilty and you really want to help this person out, you go pay their entire mortgage or their rent, and they'll still hate you. They'll still have an issue with you. But what can you do about that? You really can't do anything about it. Just hopefully that they will realize that you did something for them, remember that, and it'll get better. But like I said, some people go to their grave and still will have an issue with you. So it doesn't benefit you to hold on to that particular issue. Of course, it's not good to antagonize them and stuff like that, but sometimes you gotta love people from a distance, I guess you could say. Let's see, but it does give you I'll say write all that stuff down. Write down what you did for them that they didn't receive it, what you said to them, what they said back to you, how it made you feel, why it hurt you. If you got to write down the original situation again, write it down, and write down why you think they really hated you about it. Sometimes it might not be you. Sometimes it could be a pain in another area for that person, and you're just the closest person to take it out on. And in my experience as a person, I think a lot of people, they take their friends and their family for granted at times, and a person that's there that they know that is non-threatening, that won't hurt them, is often the person a lot of times people target. They won't go talk to the person that actually did the hurt, because that person probably don't want to talk to them, don't want to listen to them, don't do nothing. But because they got to get it out to somebody, you're actually can be actually a target to pay for somebody else's transgression or whatever against that particular person. Because sometimes it might not even be you. We'll move on. I have some other things to say about that one, but that's, yeah. The next slice would be a loss of functional limbs, wealth status. I haven't personally been through this, but I've been through situations where I didn't have complete functionality, let's just say. And that is to be sick is just hurtful. It's just really really hurt you, especially if you're a man and making, if you can't make money for your family has to take care of you. You can't run because you used to be the fastest runner, or you could run fast, or you just ran. I thought about Doctor Strange, the Marvel movie Doctor Strange. He was like a real, I guess, world-renowned surgeon, and he was driving his car or something. I could be remembering this wrong. I just remember he made a bad decision. He ended up losing the use of his hands, which is what he needed to actually be the doctor he did. His identity, part of his identity, was the ability to use his hands to perform surgeries. But when he lost that, it really just kind of destroyed him. And I see that as something that people deal with. It could be for a woman. It could be the loss of the ability to have a kid. You could have had an abortion when you were younger, or you could have had 4 or 5 abortions when you were younger. But then once you got older and you wanted to have a kid, you found out you couldn't have one. To me, that would probably be one of the worst situations you could possibly be in as a woman, And those type of things you want to write down. You want to write down what you did wrong or what you feel like you did wrong. Write all that stuff down, how you felt about it. Write what happened now, and then all the aspects that you felt about it at this point in time. But the point is to get that stuff on paper so that you can process it better, break it down. And then once you have that piece, then you can move on, whether it be adoption, or if you got to get a prosthetic limb or something like that, or if you just got to live as best you can in a situation you can. And then learn, teach other people, you know what I mean? Because you never really know who's going through the same situation you are. And you being able to connect with somebody in that situation may give you a new purpose in life, even though your original purpose, you can't fulfill your original purpose that you thought you had or that you wanted to do in life. The next slice would be a desire for revenge. The desire for the revenge it could be unresolved opportunities for revenge, either to the person themselves that caused you harm or frustration, or whatever. But the idea is to write it down and not actually do it. Okay? Sometimes it could be somebody's desire for revenge against you, and they're successful. But you want to write all that stuff down. Unforgiveness is the next one. It's a big one. It can include not forgiving others, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. Not forgiving others. Sometimes I think it's a good thing to write down why a person makes you mad. The reason is because anger is an indicator of an attack, pain, disappointment, or historical offense. And it could be a good indicator of a past issue that hasn't been resolved just yet. So exploring this can actually create additional awareness and peace for you. As if you had heartbreak in the past, and all of a sudden this person is just making you mad, but you don't really know why they're making you mad, it could be because they remind you of something that already happened. And take a hold to it and, write it out, gain that peace over it. If you got to ask for forgiveness for something, do that too. Another issue is you have other people not forgiving us, or they're not forgiving you. So it's something that's outside of your control anyway. Had a situation where I believe somebody hated me for not being there. Even though I always asked how they were doing, and they always said everything was good. But once everything went down, they turned around and they basically hated everybody that didn't come help, even though they never really asked for it. So you can't defend yourself against it, and you don't want to be too forward or too nosy. But it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just can't win. In this case, I think it's better to be prepared to let things go, to include the friendship or the family member. However, you can always keep the door open and prepare for the conversation. But get your healing first, and accept responsibility for your actions. So timing is a big thing in that, because you never know when they're going to come back. Now, because this is an external strain of which you have no control, journaling can help and be very beneficial as an outlet. Write down the interaction. How did it start? How did it go wrong? How that person said they felt, what you said and how you felt, what you say they wanted, and if it was something that you can actually do or not. Sometimes people will ask you to do things you just can't do, and then get mad at you because you can't do it, even though you can do it. And any idea of how you could have resolved or something, you couldn't even control it. But the point is to get it out of you and onto paper or onto a document, a Word document. Then you can go back and review it, update it, or not. Sometimes just getting it out helps you to be in a place of peace or patience with that other person. As a bonus, if you stay with me this far, I really appreciate your time, and hopefully I haven't been wasting your time. I wanted to talk about something that I guess is pretty near and dear to my heart. Excuse me, yeah. And it focuses on really being, it's a Christian aspect. And a lot of times you have people, they stop being Christian because they feel like God don't hear them. They feel like that God don't care for them. And that is simply not true. And the subject for this bonus topic is you can have grief toward unanswered prayers. If so, this is for you. Have you ever asked and trusted God for something and God would not answer your prayer? The pain, the guilt, and the grief of this is pretty tough. Your faith can't always overcome God's will, so to speak. There are times when you can sway God to a certain desire or direction, and there are times we cannot. And as we consider this last subject of God not answering our faith requests, God reminded me of the Garden of Eden. I believe that God had faith that Adam and Eve would not eat from the forbidden tree. However, his faith, talking about God, was not answered. And every time we sin, we are breaking God's faith in us. And if God's faith in man was not answered, then how can we expect God to answer our faith at all times? However, the cool thing is that we can always ask. However, we must also leave room for God's will in a particular situation. Even Jesus asked God the Father to take the bitter cup from him when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. However, Jesus had to choose God's will over his own will by saying, "Not my will be done, but thy will be done." And it's life is more complicated than I think a lot of times we realize, because you have God's will, you have our will, you have the will of every other person on this planet. And the Ten Commandments was specifically meant to me to keep people from breaking the faith of other people, breaking the will and faith of other people. And if God didn't want us to have free will, he wouldn't need the Ten Commandments. Everybody still be in the Garden of Eden. But God, I believe, wanted us to be able to choose to do the good things. And the Ten Commandments is as a guidepost of helping us to do good things, because our faith and our will can impact other people, just like his faith and will can impact us. And we can allow other people's faith and will to impact us. Like, let's just say somebody wants to buy us gas, and we can either say, no, I don't want you to buy me gas, or we can say, yes, thank you for the gas. And we can do that same thing with God. But in the same token, somebody can steal from us. We don't want them to steal from us. There are laws against them stealing from us, but they can still do it because they have free will. And I would say just consider that God can help us overcome situations, especially if we're close to him and hear his voice. But there are certain situations that we go through that we just have to go through. Sometimes it's that mom versus the child thing. Hey, son, daughter, don't touch the hot stove. Some sons and daughters feel like, okay, mom, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to go touch the hot stove. Ah! So we hurt because we didn't listen to our parents. And the same thing can happen if we don't listen to God. So my grief and PTSD showed me that we are not always in control of other people's lives. We're not in control of other people's lives, protection, or consequences. And that we can only make the most of the opportunities that we have before they're gone. Thanks for considering this content, and prayerfully and hopefully this continues these techniques, as far as making the pie chart, breaking everything down into certain sections, and then if you have to, break those sections down into smaller pie charts so they can help you deal with it, journal it and move on. But I really hope this helps you to avoid losing time, relationships, opportunities, and appear, and those things actually appear to be some of the consequences of grief and PTSD. That being said, all of this is a choice. You can choose to actually try to get out of your grief, your PTSD, or you can choose not to. But I would invite you to choose to do it. Choose to overcome something that you didn't ever think you could overcome. Choose to be a newer version of yourself, a stronger version of yourself, from going through certain things so that you can actually help other people. And sometimes helping people doesn't even include words. Sometimes helping people is just somebody being there. And being sensitive enough just to be there a lot of times can give people comfort. But this is when nice guys can retaliate. And retaliation doesn't always have to be something negative. Retaliation just means you just change. Okay? You change. You don't allow the norm. Retaliation against this whole video in itself is a retaliation against PTSD. It's a retaliation against grief. It's a retaliation against things that make us normally do a certain thing, and we decide to change that. But please hit the like button, share, subscribe, and I pray that you guys have peace and I pray actually kind of enjoy the journey and just kind of feel that weight of all this grief and PTSD and disappointment just lift off your shoulders. And that it becomes even more addictive to a point to where you get done quicker and just start moving in life. But thank you guys, and I hope you have a good one.